This is TradeFlow News, bringing you relevant news and insights from around the world. TradeFlow News, enabling trade for SMEs and economies worldwide.
These are some of the key topics that we will be looking into in today's program.
First, let's take a look at the overnight headlines which are impacting the commodity markets.
OPEC oil output fell in January, a Reuters survey found on Tuesday, as Iraqi exports declined and Nigerian output did not recover further while Gulf members maintained strong compliance with an OPEC Plus deal on production cuts to support the market. The OPEC pumped 28.87 million barrels per day, BPD, the survey found, down 50,000 barrels of oil per day from December. In September, OPEC output hit its highest since 2020. Output from OPEC and allies including Russia, known collectively as OPEC Plus, increased for most of 2022 as demand recovered. For November, with oil prices weakening, the group made its largest cut to production targets since the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic in 2020.
Demand for U.S. crude and petroleum products rose 178,000 barrels per day, BPD, in November to 20.59 million barrels of oil per day, the highest since August, the U.S. Energy Information Administration, EIA, said Tuesday in its Petroleum Supply Monthly, PSM, report. Demand for finished motor gasoline rose 21,000 barrels of oil per day to 8.85 million BPD in November, also its highest since November, EIA said. Monthly crude oil field production fell in November to 12.38 million barrels of oil per day, down from a 31-month high of 12.41 million BPD in October, EIA said.
Moving on to the top news in the energy sector.
Electricity output dropped in France on Tuesday and petrol product deliveries from Total Energies sites stopped as workers walked off their jobs in protest at planned pension reforms. The strike, which is a backlash against the government's plans to make people work longer before retirement, also disrupted public transport and schools. Unions want to keep up pressure on the government following protests earlier this month. The CGT, France's second-largest union, has called for a new round of strikes from February 6 to 8 at state-owned electricity utility EDF, adding to a previous call for industrial action on those dates for the refining sector.
Oil prices rose on Wednesday as signs of slowing inflation in the United States eased fears that the world's largest oil user may face a recession because of further interest rate hikes, and a weaker dollar supported some buying interest. Brent crude futures gained 32 cents, or 0.4%, to $85.78 a barrel at 0407 GMT. U.S. West Texas Intermediate, WTI, crude futures rose 42 cents, or 0.5%, to $79.29 a barrel. Both benchmarks were up for a second day, after gaining about 1% in the previous session. Next, we have the top news in metal markets. Copper prices edged higher on Wednesday ahead of the Federal Reserve's meeting outcome, with investors also awaiting post-holiday demand pickup in top consumer China. 3-month copper on the London Metal Exchange was up just 0.3% at $9,246 a ton by 0437 GMT. The most traded March copper contract on the Shanghai Futures Exchange added 0.4% to 69,740 yuan, $10,333.69 a ton. The Fed is widely expected to raise rates by 25 basis points at the conclusion of its two-day policy meeting later in the day. Investors will closely monitor comments from Fed Chair Jerome Powell too.
Gold held steady on Wednesday, as investors refrained from taking big bets ahead of the U.S. Federal Reserve's policy decision due later in the day. Spot gold was flat at $1,927.75 per ounce, as of 0720 GMT. U.S. gold futures fell 0.1% to $1,943.40. Gold should hold above $1,900 levels heading into the Fed meeting, and the Fed message needs to be heard to grasp bullion's next likely direction, said Matt Simpson, a senior market analyst at Citi Index.
We will now look at the top news in the agricultural.
India's rice exports in 2022 jumped to a record high despite the government's curbs on overseas sale. as buyers continued to make purchases from the South Asian country because of competitive prices, according to government and industry officials. The record exports allowed Asian and African countries to import the staple at a time when supplies of wheat and other grains were hit by drought and Russia's invasion of Ukraine. India, the world's biggest rice exporter, in September banned exports of broken rice and slapped a 20% export tax on some non-basmati varieties as erratic monsoon cut production. That is all for today's news on commodity markets. Stay tuned to TradeFlow News as we continue to provide you with more updates. We also invite you to follow us on Twitter at TradeFlow News, which allows you to watch our program on your mobile device or desktop to receive information from there.
TradeFlow Capital Management is pleased to be one of the founding members of the Trade Finance Working Group launched on the 27th of January 2023. Created under the auspices of the Alternative Credit Council and AIMA, the Alternative Investment Management Association, the working group brings together alternative lenders in the trade finance sector to support the development of trade finance as an asset class, with the remit to raise awareness of trade finance amongst investors and address challenges to greater participation by alternative lenders in the sector. Joining this group aligns perfectly with TradeFlow's experience in this asset class and its mission to help reduce the growing trade finance gap faced by SMEs.